Jacob adjusted his pack as he stepped into the dense Appalachian forest, the morning mist clinging to the towering pines. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves, but beneath it lay a faint metallic tang that set his nerves on edge. He'd heard the stories, whispers about the mine, about the strange disappearances, and about something lurking in the shadows. But tonight, Jacob wasn't just chasing legends. He was chasing answers. As he ventured deeper, the trees seemed to close around him, their twisted branches like skeletal fingers reaching out. The sun struggled to pierce the canopy, casting eerie patterns on the forest floor. He paused near an ancient oak, where old rusted equipment lay half buried in moss and dirt, the remnants of the long-abandoned McAllister mine. Jacob crouched down, brushing away leaves to reveal strange symbols etched into the metal. They pulsed faintly with an otherworldly glow, almost as if the forest itself was alive, watching. He felt a chill creep down his spine. He stood and pulled out a worn map, the edges tattered and stained with age. It showed the intricate network of mine shafts that threaded beneath the mountains like veins. Locals had told him the government had sealed many of the entrances years ago, but rumors spoke of hidden tunnels left open, places where the earth seemed to breathe with secrets. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by a distant haunting howl, a sound that didn't belong to any animal he knew. Jacob grabbed his flashlight and pressed onward, determination hardening in his chest. The path narrowed, winding between ancient trees draped in moss. Shadows shifted as if alive, and every rustle set his heart pounding. Then, just beyond a bend, the ground gave way to the rusted remains of a minecart track, disappearing into a yawning tunnel. He hesitated, swallowing hard. The stories warned of those who entered and never returned, pulled into the darkness by voices only they could hear. But Jacob wasn't alone. His partner Grace was just behind, steady and determined. "Ready?" he called softly. A nod answered him, and together they stepped into the darkness, leaving the fading light behind. The air inside was thick with dust and damp, carrying a faint metallic scent that made Jacob's stomach churn. Their footsteps echoed off stone walls as they descended deeper, the beam of their flashlights trembling with every step. Whispers drifted on the stale air, soft, distant, unintelligible. Grace shivered. "Do you hear that?" Jacob nodded, gripping his flashlight tighter. Voices, but not like anything human. They pressed on, the tunnel twisting and narrowing, until they reached a junction marked with faded symbols. Grace pointed to one, an intricate spiral carved deep into the rock. "Someone's been here recently," she said quietly. Jacob's eyes narrowed. Or something. The deeper they went, the more the mine seemed alive, watching them with unseen eyes. And somewhere, just beyond the reach of their light, the Whisper Maw waited, shifting in the darkness, ready to weave its deadly lullaby. Grace tightened her grip on the flashlight as they moved cautiously through the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the mountain. The air grew colder and heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and rusted metal. Every step echoed ominously, a reminder of the countless souls who had tread this path before and never returned. A faint sound drifted through the shadows, a whisper, soft and distant, almost like a sigh. Grace froze, her breath hitching as a voice floated toward her, gentle and familiar. "Grace." She spun toward the source, heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" Jacob nodded grimly. "It's the Whisper Maw. It mimics voices, lost loved ones, memories. It's how it lures people in." The tunnel stretched ahead, splitting into two narrow passages. One was choked with rubble, the other beckoned with an eerie stillness. Grace's eyes darted between them. "We have to find out what's causing this," Jacob said. "If we can stop it, maybe we can stop the disappearances." The whispers grew louder, weaving a tapestry of voices. Her mother's lullaby, a childhood friend's laughter, and distant cries that tugged at their sanity. Grace shook her head, fighting the pull. "Don't let it get inside your head." Jacob glanced over, noticing her trembling hands. "Stay close. We're in this together." As they ventured deeper, the walls seemed to breathe, shadows flickering like restless spirits. Suddenly, a sharp clang echoed, metal striking stone. They froze. "Did you see that?" Grace whispered. Jacob nodded, shining his light toward the noise. A shadow darted just beyond the beam, too quick to identify. The air thickened with a sinister presence, and the voices swelled into a haunting chorus. "We're not alone down here," Jacob said quietly, "and the Maw is watching." The tunnel walls seemed to close in around them as Jacob and Grace pressed deeper into the earth, their flashlights piercing the oppressive darkness with trembling beams. Every sound echoed unnaturally, dripping water, distant creaks, and the faint, ever-present whispers weaving through the stale air like threads of smoke. Grace's breathing quickened. The voice that had called her name earlier lingered just beyond comprehension, tugging at memories she wished she could forget. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. Jacob's gaze flicked between the twisting passages. "We're close," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "There has to be something, some source feeding this thing." The Whisper Maw wasn't just a predator. It was a hunter of memories, of emotions. It shifted and twisted, taking on shapes and voices that no two people heard the same way. It preyed on the lonely, the desperate, and the lost. As they rounded a corner, Jacob's light caught on a collapsed section of tunnel. Splintered timber and shattered rock blocked their path, but amidst the rubble, something glinted. A small tarnished locket, its chain tangled in the debris. Grace knelt, fingers trembling as she lifted the locket. Inside, a faded photograph showed a smiling young girl, eyes bright but distant. "Another victim," Jacob whispered. This Maw feeds on more than just flesh." Suddenly, the air shifted. The whispers turned frantic, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of fear and longing. A cold breeze swept past, extinguishing their flashlights. Darkness swallowed them whole. "Stay together!" Jacob shouted, fumbling for his lighter. In the flickering flame, Grace caught a glimpse of movement, something vast and shifting, barely visible, but unmistakably watching. The Whisper Maw was near, and it was hungry. The small flame from Jacob's lighter cast long, flickering shadows on the jagged walls of the mine shaft. Grace's breath came in shallow gasps as her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the shifting presence that stalked them in the darkness. "Keep moving," Jacob urged, voice low but steady. "We can't stay here." They crept forward cautiously, the lighter's glow barely illuminating the narrow passage ahead. The whispers had quieted, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed against their ears. Suddenly, from somewhere above, a soft, sorrowful voice floated down, a woman singing an old lullaby. Grace's heart clenched painfully. The voice was hauntingly familiar, a song her mother used to sing to her when she was a child. "That's her," Grace whispered, tears threatening to spill. "It's trying to draw me in." Jacob shook his head. "It's a trap. The Maw doesn't want to help, it wants to consume." As the lullaby wove through the air, the walls seemed to ripple, as if alive. Shadows coalesced into shifting shapes, faces twisted in anguish, hands reaching out like desperate pleas. Grace gripped Jacob's arm. "We have to get out, now." But the path behind them had vanished, collapsed under an unseen force, leaving only darkness and the creeping hunger ahead. The Whisper Maw was closing in, its voice now a chorus of all the lost souls it had claimed, echoing through the tunnels like a siren's call. Jacob swallowed hard. "We fight or we fall." Together they stepped deeper into the abyss, the Maw's hunger a living shadow trailing their every move. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly before Jacob and Grace, the walls narrowing and twisting in ways that defied logic. Each step forward felt heavier, as if the very earth beneath them resisted their progress. The whispers returned, swirling around their minds with voices both comforting and cruel. Jacob clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. "Remember what we saw. The locket, the faces. This thing feeds on pain, on memory. If we want to survive, we need to stay rooted in the present." Grace nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "But how? It's like it knows everything, my fears, my regrets." A sudden shuffling sound echoed from the shadows ahead. Jacob raised his flashlight just in time to catch a glimpse of something darting between broken beams, a figure, shifting and blurry, never fully forming. "The Maw," Jacob whispered. "It's testing us." They pressed onward, every sense alert. Grace's ears caught a faint scratching noise behind them. She spun, flashlight sweeping the darkness, but saw only empty space. "This place plays tricks," Jacob said grimly. "It wants us to turn on each other, to lose our grip." A cold, spectral hand brushed against Grace's shoulder and she gasped, stumbling forward. Jacob caught her, eyes wide with fear. "Don't listen to it," he urged. "Don't let it break you." The deeper they went, the more the Moor's illusions intensified, visions of lost friends, forgotten dreams, and whispered promises of escape. But each was a trap, pulling them closer to the edge. As they rounded a final bend, the tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber, its walls shimmering with phosphorescent fungi. At the center stood an ancient, rusted elevator shaft, its cables frayed and hanging like skeletal fingers. Jacob exchanged a glance with Grace. This has to be it, the heart of the Moor's domain. A low growl rumbled through the cavern, and the shadows around them thickened, coalescing into the monstrous, shifting form of the Whisper Maw, its eyes glowing with a hunger that chilled their very souls. They had reached the moment of truth. The cavern's eerie glow cast long shadows as Jacob and Grace faced the Whisper Maw, its massive form shifting like smoke caught in a storm. Its eyes, glowing orbs of hunger and sorrow, locked onto them, radiating a cold intelligence that sent chills down their spines. Jacob tightened his grip on the crowbar he'd found earlier, the only weapon between them and the unknown. Grace stood beside him, steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. The Maw's voice rippled through the air, a dissonant chorus of the voices it had stolen, pleading, mocking, desperate. "You cannot outrun me," it whispered, voice folding into every corner of the cavern. "I am the echo of all you've lost." Grace's fingers trembled as she clutched a small talisman around her neck, a keepsake from her grandmother said to ward off evil. She whispered a prayer under her breath. Jacob stepped forward, raising the crowbar. "We're not your prey." The creature shifted, its form elongating into the shape of a gaunt man, eyes hollow but burning with an ancient sorrow. It reached out with tendrils of shadow that writhed like serpents. Grace darted forward, swinging the talisman in front of her. The Maw recoiled, a high-pitched shriek piercing the cavern. The shadows writhed and flailed, struggling against the unseen force. Jacob slammed the crowbar into the rusted elevator shaft's control panel, sparks flying as wires sparked to life. The ancient machinery groaned and creaked, as if waking from a long slumber. The Maw screamed, a sound that shook the very mountain, as the elevator cables began to hum with energy. Light flooded the chamber, burning away the darkness and the twisted memories that clung to the walls. As the elevator jolted into motion, Jacob grabbed Grace's hand. "We have one chance. Hold on." The cavern trembled as the Maw's form dissolved into a swirl of shadows, retreating into the cracks and crevices of the mountain. With a final roar, the mine shook violently, rocks tumbling from the ceiling as the elevator rose toward salvation. For the first time in hours, Jacob and Grace dared to hope. The elevator shuddered and groaned as it ascended, its ancient cables protesting under the sudden strain. Jacob gripped the railing tightly, muscles tense, while Grace clung to his arm, eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. The stale, oppressive air of the mine began to give way to cooler, fresher breaths as they climbed closer to the surface. Outside, faint rays of sunlight filtered through the canopy, promising freedom from the suffocating darkness below. But beneath the hope lay a nagging uncertainty. The Whisper Maw wasn't just a creature of flesh and bone, it was a manifestation of loss and memory, and such things rarely vanished so easily. As the elevator reached the top with a harsh clang, the heavy doors creaked open to reveal the overgrown entrance of the McAllister mine. Jacob stepped out first, eyes scanning the forest edge for any sign of danger. Grace followed, her breath coming in deep, steadying gasps. "We made it," she whispered, a smile breaking through her exhaustion. Jacob nodded but didn't relax. "Not yet. The Maw may be gone for now, but its shadows will linger." They began the long trek back through the forest, the sun climbing higher and chasing away the remnants of night. Birds called overhead, and the scent of pine filled the air, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness they'd escaped. As they walked, Grace pulled out the locket they had found deep within the mine, holding it carefully in her palm. "We have to tell someone. This needs to be stopped for good." Jacob glanced at her, eyes sharp. "We will. But first, we need proof. Evidence that can't be ignored." The forest around them seemed to listen, leaves rustling softly in the breeze, as if holding its own secrets close. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the abandoned mines, the Whisper Maw waited, patient and hungry, its story far from over. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and whispered conversations. Jacob and Grace worked tirelessly to document everything they had seen, the eerie symbols etched in the tunnels, the shifting shadows, and the unnerving voices that seemed to seep into their very minds. They compiled photographs, sketches, and audio recordings, hoping to capture proof of the Whisper Maw's existence. Their small cabin, nestled on the edge of the forest, became a fortress of research and frantic planning. Old books on Appalachian folklore lay scattered across the worn wooden table, alongside maps marked with the labyrinthine tunnels of the McAllister mine. Every clue led them deeper into a mystery older and darker than they had imagined. Grace stared at a faded journal, its pages brittle with age. "This mentions disappearances dating back over a century," she said quietly. "Miners, loggers, all vanished without a trace. The locals called it a curse." Jacob ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion etched on his face. "And the government's been covering it up ever since. No official records, just silence." Their conversation was interrupted by the faint crackle of the radio. Jacob grabbed the device, tuning through static until a weak voice came through. "Help, trapped, mines, danger." The signal cut out abruptly, leaving only silence. Grace's eyes widened. "Someone's still down there." Jacob grabbed his gear. "We're going back. This time, we're bringing help." As night fell over the Appalachian mountains, the forest whispered around them. The same whispering voices, the same shifting shadows. The Whisper Maw was waiting, its hunger unquenched, ready to weave new memories into its ever-growing collection. And Jacob and Grace knew that some secrets were meant to be uncovered, no matter the cost. The rescue team assembled quickly, veteran spelunkers, local guides, and a few scientists eager to uncover the truth behind the decades-old disappearances. Jacob and Grace briefed them thoroughly, sharing their harrowing experience and the chilling reality of the Whisper Maw lurking beneath the Appalachian soil. The group entered the mine just as dusk settled, their flashlights piercing the growing darkness. The air was thick with tension, every footstep met with the echoes of forgotten screams and whispered warnings. As they descended, the Maw's presence was undeniable. Voices wafted from the shadows, each one a personal torment to someone in the group. Memories twisted and distorted to prey on their fears and regrets. One guide, a seasoned miner named Old Tom, suddenly stopped, clutching his head. "It's calling me. My daughter, lost in a fire." His voice cracked with pain, but the team pulled him back, refusing to let the Maw consume him. Grace exchanged a glance with Jacob. "We have to keep moving. The deeper we go, the stronger it gets." In a cavern illuminated by eerie fungal light, they found the source, a twisted amalgamation of shadows and memories, a massive, shifting maw lined with spectral teeth that whispered and screamed in a cacophony of anguish. Jacob raised his voice. "We're here to end this." The maw responded with a deafening roar, shaking the cavern walls as it lunged toward them, tendrils reaching to snare their minds and souls. The battle had begun, and none would escape unscathed. The cavern erupted into chaos as the Whisper Maw surged forward, its shadowy tendrils twisting and writhing like living smoke. The rescue team scattered, flashlights swinging wildly as they struggled to maintain their footing on the uneven ground. Screams echoed, both from the living and the echoes of those long lost to the Maw's hunger. Jacob and Grace stood back to back, weapons ready and minds focused. Jacob swung his crowbar at the nearest tendril, the metal connecting with a hiss of shadowy energy. Grace clutched her talisman tightly, chanting quietly, a prayer, a plea, for protection against the entity's grasp. The Maw's form shifted rapidly, now appearing as a twisted mass of faces, some anguished, some serene, each one a memory trapped and twisted by the creature's malevolent will. It reached for Grace, its voice a haunting melody of her late grandmother's lullaby, threatening to pull her into its endless darkness. "No!" Jacob shouted, grabbing Grace's arm and pulling her back. "Fight it! Remember who you are." Together they pushed forward, striking at the core of the Maw's being, a pulsating mass of shadow nestled within the ancient mine's heart. As Jacob drove the crowbar into the glowing center, Grace held her talisman aloft, light spilling out and piercing the darkness. With a deafening scream, the Maw convulsed, its form unraveling like smoke caught in a storm. The cavern shook violently as the shadows dissipated and an eerie silence fell. Jacob and Grace, panting and battered, looked around at the shattered remains of the Maw's domain. The whispers were gone. For now. The air in the cavern felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. Jacob and Grace took tentative steps forward, their eyes adjusting to the dim glow from the scattered bioluminescent fungi. The oppressive darkness that had seemed alive moments ago had receded, leaving only the cold stone walls and the distant drip of water. Grace wiped the sweat and grime from her brow, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is it really over?" Jacob shook his head slowly. "I don't think anything like this ever truly ends. The Maw may be gone, but the scars it left, both on this place and on us, will remain." They moved toward the mine entrance, their footsteps echoing softly. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the Appalachian mountains, casting golden hues across the trees. The forest seemed peaceful, almost indifferent to the horrors lurking beneath. As they emerged from the mine, a small group of locals awaited them, faces filled with hope, fear, and curiosity. News of the rescue had spread quickly, and many had gathered, desperate for answers and relief. Jacob addressed the crowd, holding up the locket and talisman as proof of their ordeal. "We've faced the Whisper Maw and survived, but it's not just a creature, it's a manifestation of pain and loss, feeding on memories. If we ignore it, others will suffer." Grace stepped forward, her eyes scanning the crowd. "We're organizing efforts to map and secure the mines, to prevent anyone else from falling into its grasp, but we need your help. This is a community fight." Among the crowd, an older man nodded solemnly. "My great-grandfather disappeared in these mines decades ago. Maybe now, with your courage, his story and those of others can finally find peace." As the sun rose higher, Jacob and Grace knew their battle had changed them forever. The Whisper Maw was defeated, for now, but the mountains still held many secrets, waiting to be uncovered. Jacob and Grace spent the following weeks poring over the documents and recordings they had gathered. The whispers of the Maw had faded from their minds, but the weight of the experience lingered. The deeper they dug, the clearer the pattern became. This was no ordinary creature. It was tied to the land itself, a dark reflection of the tragedies that had unfolded in the mines over generations. The townspeople rallied behind their cause, joining efforts to secure the entrances to the abandoned shafts and create memorials for those lost. But with every closure, whispers persisted, rumors of strange voices heard in the woods, lights flickering in places long forgotten. One evening, as Jacob reviewed the old mining logs, Grace approached with a furrowed brow. "There's something I didn't notice before." She pointed to a series of entries marked unexplained disappearances, clustered around a small, unmapped shaft deep in the northern woods. Jacob's eyes narrowed. "We need to check it out. If the Maw's influence still lingers, it might be strongest there." They prepared for their journey with cautious determination, knowing the shadows of the Whisper Maw were far from vanquished. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, armed with knowledge, courage, and the hope that someday the mountain's secrets might finally rest. The northern woods were dense and foreboding, sunlight filtering weakly through the thick canopy. Jacob and Grace moved carefully, guided by the faded map and the echoes of history that clung to the land. Each step brought a quiet tension, as if the forest itself held its breath, wary of their intrusion. As they neared the hidden shaft, the air grew colder, and an unnatural silence fell. No birds sang, no wind rustled the leaves. The entrance was almost invisible, covered by years of overgrowth and decay. Grace pushed aside the brush, revealing the yawning mouth of the shaft, black and endless. Jacob shone his flashlight inside, the beams swallowed by darkness. "We shouldn't be here," Grace murmured, a shiver running down her spine. "But we have to know." Descending carefully, they soon found signs of the past, rusted equipment, faded markings, and graffiti left by those who had come before. But the deeper they went, the more the familiar whispers returned, swirling around them in a disorienting chorus of voices. Suddenly a faint cry echoed through the tunnel, a child's voice calling for help, desperate and real. Jacob tightened his grip on the crowbar. This isn't just memories anymore, someone's trapped. The Whisper Maw's hunger stirred, sensing new prey. The shadows shifted, and the true depth of the mountain's secret began to reveal itself, dark, alive, and waiting. The deeper Jacob and Grace ventured, the heavier the air became, thick with moisture and an oppressive sense of dread. The faint cries echoed again, guiding them like a twisted beacon through the labyrinth of tunnels and rusted support beams. Suddenly, the narrow passage opened into a cavern, its walls slick with mineral deposits that glistened under their flashlights. But the cavern was not empty. Scattered among the rocks were remnants of old campsites, discarded cans, tattered clothing, and a makeshift shelter barely holding together. Grace's voice trembled. These must be the people who disappeared. Survivors, maybe. Jacob scanned the shadows, senses alert. But where are they now? A sudden, chilling whisper slipped through the cavern, the voice of a mother calling for her lost child, soft, desperate, impossibly real. The ground beneath them trembled, and from the darkness, the Whisper Maw began to emerge, its form a writhing mass of shadow and sorrow, eyes glowing like dying embers. Jacob and Grace exchanged a determined glance. This was no longer just a battle of survival. It was a fight for the souls trapped within the Maw's grasp. As the creature lunged forward, tendrils reaching out like grasping hands, they steeled themselves for the fight to end all fights, deep beneath the Appalachian mountains, where the past refused to stay buried. The cavern exploded into chaos as Jacob and Grace fought desperately against the Whisper Maw's relentless assault. Shadows lashed out, twisting around their limbs and threatening to pull them into the endless darkness. Grace swung her talisman, the ancient symbol glowing fiercely as it repelled the tendrils momentarily, giving Jacob a chance to strike with his crowbar. Each blow landed with a resounding crack, fracturing the creature's smoky form, but the Maw seemed to absorb the damage, reshaping itself with a malevolent will. The voices it mimicked swirled around them, pleas, accusations, and sorrow, each one a fragment of the countless lives it had claimed. Jacob gritted his teeth, focusing on the core of the creature where the light pulsed faintly. "Grace, now!" With a final desperate cry, Grace thrust the talisman into the heart of the Maw's shadowy mass. A brilliant light erupted, flooding the cavern and forcing the creature to howl in agony as its form began to unravel. The shadows screamed, dissolving into wisps that vanished like smoke on the wind. Silence fell, deep and complete. Jacob and Grace collapsed onto the cold stone floor, breathing heavily, their bodies aching but their spirits unbroken. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke over the Appalachians, promising a new day, one free from the Whisper Maw's haunting presence. But deep within the mountain, a single whisper lingered, faint and almost inaudible, a reminder that some darkness never fully fades. The silence that followed the Maw's defeat was profound, almost sacred. Jacob and Grace sat side by side in the cavern's fading glow, their breaths slow and steady as exhaustion claimed them. Around them, the walls seemed less oppressive, the shadows retreating into the cracks and crevices where they belonged. Grace reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from Jacob's forehead. "Do you think it's really over?" He met her gaze, the weight of their journey etched into his tired eyes. "Maybe. But we both know the mountains hold secrets we haven't even begun to understand." As they made their way back toward the surface, the forest greeted them with a chorus of birdsong and the gentle rustle of leaves. The sun was rising, casting golden light over the Appalachian peaks, bathing the world in warmth and hope. Jacob paused, looking back at the entrance to the mine, now sealed and silent. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Grace smiled, the first genuine smile in days. Together. The Whisper Maw was gone, but the stories it inspired, the memories it unearthed, and the courage it forged would live on, echoing through the mountains and the hearts of those